I'm Ida Hattemer-Higgins, and the history of history. The oceans rose, and the clouds washed over the sky. The tide of humanity came revolving in love and betrayal, in skyscrapers and ruins, through walls breached and children conjured, and soon it was the year 2002. On an early morning in September of that year, in a forest outside Berlin, a young woman woke from a short sleep, not knowing where she was. Several months of her life had gone missing from her mind, and she was as fresh as a child. She sat upright. Her hair was long, her clothes made for a man, stiff trousers, a slouch hat, and a long woolen overcoat, although underneath she wore a pair of high-heeled boots. South of her chin was the body of a harem girl, a luxurious body moving lithely, ripe with the knowledge of its strength, youth, and loping good health. Her face, on the other hand, was the face of a mandarin, overcome with sensitivity and perpetual nervous fatigue. The dirty postcards of the French fin de siècle sometimes show women of this kind. Even while offering their bodies with abandon, such females wear faces charged with the pathos of intellect, growing kittenish, with leery, fragile, world-weary grins. All in all, Margaret looked like someone who would find trouble. Or in any case, already had. The night hung low. Margaret cast her eyes about and saw the birches. She reached for her bag, a leather briefcase lying slack beside the tree she leaned against, and noticed in the movement that her hand ached. Both her hands hurt, and she did not know why. For want of a better idea, she stood up and began to walk. Twigs cracked under her high-heeled boots. The sound startled her. She came to a brook and put the bag on her shoulder and her hands down on the stones and picked her way across on all fours. The woolen overcoat dragged in the water. She saw by the aging moonlight that came through a break in the young pines that her palms and fingers were rubbed deeply with dirt, so deeply it looked as though they were tattooed with it, although the skin of her wrists was clean and shining. Margaret found the edge of the forest as the day came, as the air turned grey and smoky. The slash of bird call was shrill. It blotted out her thoughts for a while, and she stopped wondering what had happened in the night. She found a dirt road, and then asphalt, villas, green awnings, slate roofs, wheelbarrows, and hibernating rose bushes, and finally Grunewald station. By the time she was riding the train homeward into the city, Margaret was becoming afraid again. But after a new style, no longer did the threat sit at her throat. Now it lay in the marrow of things. She saw a perfectly miniaturized beech leaf pasted with wetness on her sleeve, and it seemed a souvenir of bad and mysterious things. She looked at her dirt-printed palms and did not know why the dirt. She shifted her body on the plastic seat and felt the drag of wet fabric pulled aside the overcoat and heavy red scarf. She saw her clothes patched with bluish pine needles sticking to the wetness, and on the hem, a displaced ladybug made it slow away, and she did not know why there was evidence of so much nature, of so much disorder. The roofers, the chimney sweeps, the delivery men on the early morning train, they looked at Margaret's windswept face and saw an expression rarely seen. There she was in her heavy wool, her face with its broken parts even heavier, and you could almost see it. She was crushing under the strain, trying to modernize herself to match the day. Some fine imperative had gone missing. The S-Bahn train pulled into Zoo Station and paused. The cold air rushed through the open doors. With a heave of strength and puffed screech, an intercity train came to a halt on the neighboring track, and a platform clock struck 6 with an audible spasm of the minute hand. There was a chime over the loudspeaker, the announcement of departures to Lyon, to Trieste, even to Amsterdam, and the crowd on the platform shifted like a hive. The doors shut and the train slipped into motion. Margaret looked out through the milky graffiti scratched in the window. There was the glory of the morning city, and soon, intermittent through the trees, the gilded angel in the park caught the light. A woman walked under the bridge in the Tiergarten, on cobblestones the same color as the automatic pigeons picking between them. She wore a narrow white scarf and pushed a pram, and her hair blew up toward the sky with the wind. Margaret looked away. She looked down at her knees. She saw the red and black insect crawling there. She frowned. Her lips turned under. She felt a fury and an envy and a sense of starvation. She reached down, and with 2 fingers she lifted the checkered insect and held it in her hand. She closed her eyes, but there was no escape. She hauled her eyes open again. Sleep frightened her as well. She looked out the window through smarting eyes, her right hand cradling the crawling beetle, and then she saw, but now in the far distance, the woman with the white scarf, and again the wind lifted the woman's hair toward the sky, and it was like a scream. All it took was a tightening. The red and black beetle became a streak of syrup on her hand. She could not help it. Margaret slept, sinking deeper toward the window, her knees nudging the knees of the woman opposite, the membranes of her eyelids so pale they were translucent to the shock of the sun. She dreamt terrible dreams. She woke up at the end of the line at Fete, and the grasses and trees again, but the morning was no longer in its early tooth, and she was on the eastern edge of Berlin instead of the west. She had slept through her transfer at Friedrichstrasse. It was a train employee who woke her. He asked to see her ticket. Margaret jerked her head up. She reached into the breast pocket of her heavy man's overcoat and found an American passport, soaked through and reeking. She fingered the pocket on the other side and found a laminated student ID with its semester train ticket. When she got home to her apartment in Schöneberg, she was so light that moving toward the bedroom, she hardly had to walk, lifted by a wave and thrown against the surf. One Margaret, then, a more solid one, pulled herself under the covers and slept hungrily, and another one, a shadow of the sleeping girl, went into the wardrobe and took everything out. She carried it all down to the courtyard and heaved the clumps of clothing indiscriminately into the trash. She came back up to the bedroom, where she slipped in with the sleeping Margaret again, and they were one. When the reunified Margaret awoke from the third sleep, it was a new planet. On this new planet, she went back to her old life.